Have you ever wondered why things don't always go the way they should? Maybe you're out driving, folding laundry, or just lying still with your thoughts. Let's talk for a moment about stories and how real life tells a different kind. When we were children, stories ended with triumph. Good conquers evil. The hero wins. But the world doesn't always follow that script. And maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe that's wisdom in disguise. Ned Stark, with all his honor, loses his life in the first season. And yet, isn't that what life sometimes feels like? Unfair, brutal, but honest. George R.R. Martin didn't give us a fantasy. He gave us a mirror that shows sometimes the strong fail. Sometimes the kind get crushed, and yet, somehow, it's still worth waking up in the morning, still worth trying, loving, trusting again. But maybe the deeper life lesson is this: to live well without them, to love without certainty, to lead without applause, to rise again, even if no one watches. In that chaos, something emerges, not control, not glory, but presence. Living in a way that honors the moment, not the reward. Maybe that's the truest form of peace. In a world as tangled as Westeros, everyone sees through a different lens. What one calls savage, another calls free. What seems like treason to one tribe might be survival to another. Remember the wildlings, called barbarians by the people of the Seven Kingdoms. But to Jon Snow, they were families, children, fathers, mothers. To Mance Rayder, they were simply people wanting warmth, food, and dignity. Perspective changes everything. And isn't that true in our world too? The person who cuts you off in traffic, are they reckless or rushing to help someone they love? The colleague who disagrees with you, are they stubborn or simply shaped by a different story? When we pause, we realize no one sees the world exactly as we do. Culture, trauma, upbringing, these things sketch the edges of our vision. In Game of Thrones, no single character owns the truth. The story flows through Tyrion's wit, Arya's vengeance, Daenerys' fire, Cersei's pride, and yet all of them, even the worst of them. When we judge quickly, we miss the lesson. But when we listen, truly listen, we begin to understand why people act the way they do. It doesn't mean we have to agree, but it means we walk with less anger, less certainty, and maybe a little more grace. The world is more than one truth, and wisdom begins when we stop needing to be right and start needing to be curious. There's a scene where Daenerys Targaryen, once a girl traded like cattle by her brother, says to Jon Snow, "Do you know what kept me standing through all those years in exile? Faith. Not in gods, not in legends, but in myself." In a world designed to crush her, Daenerys held on to one thing, her belief that she mattered. And maybe that's something we forget too often. That self-belief isn't indulgence, it's necessary. Not every storm you face will come with a cheerleading squad. Not every decision you make will be applauded. There will be nights when the world feels silent, or worse, hostile. And in those moments, the only light might be the one you keep inside. This isn't about ego, it's about resilience, believing in your right to try again, to fail without shame, to speak even when your voice shakes. Daenerys walked through fire, literally. But we all have our own fires, don't we? The job we didn't get, the relationship that broke, the days when we couldn't see our own value. But here's the truth. You're still here. And that counts for something. Every act of belief in yourself, every quiet decision to begin again, is its own form of rebellion. A gentle, unwavering declaration, I will not disappear. You just need to show up for yourself, fully, consistently, quietly. And when you do, you begin to become someone the world has to notice. Sometimes we don't get to choose how long we live, but we do get to choose how we live. Game of Thrones didn't shy away from death. In fact, it gave it to us constantly. But what lingered was not the dying. It was the living. Characters we loved were taken too soon. And yet, what we remember isn't just that they died. We remember how they lived, with purpose, with conviction, or sometimes with regret. There's a line from Petyr Baelish, Littlefinger, that slips under the radar but sticks with you. Everyone dies eventually. The sad part is, some people never really live. Let that sit for a moment. It's easy to exist, harder to live, to risk, to speak up, to care when caring might hurt, to love fully, knowing it could end. We waste so much time waiting for the right moment. The guarantee that we won't get hurt, won't fail, won't be embarrassed. But no such moment exists. You either show up for your own life now, or you watch it drift by, quietly, like snow melting into stone. In the series, even the most flawed characters, Theon, Sandor Clegane, even Jaime, they had moments of redemption, not because they were perfect, but because they chose, at some point, to act with meaning. That choice is always available to us, even when things fall apart. Even when no one's watching. Even when we're tired. Life asks only one thing, that we take responsibility for our own existence. To not sleepwalk through our years, to not reach the end wondering if we ever truly showed up. So maybe the better question isn't, how long will I live? But rather, when will I finally begin? Tyrion Lannister once told Jon Snow, "Never forget what you are, the rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you." He was mocked for being a dwarf, but he never let that mockery define him. Instead, he claimed it, not as a wound, but as a shield. And that's a lesson we all need. Because no matter who you are, someone, somewhere, will try to shrink you. For how you look, for where you come from, for the mistakes you've made, for the dreams that don't make sense to them. You can spend your life trying to hide those things. Or you can wear them, not as shame, but as truth. When we hide parts of ourselves, we give the world the power to hurt us. But when we name our scars, when we accept our past, they lose their sting. They become history, not identity. You may not look like everyone else. You may not think like everyone else. You may have stumbled more times than you can count. But here's the quiet gift of being underestimated. You learn to grow without permission. To surprise the world not with noise, but with presence, with substance. Tyrion wasn't the strongest. He didn't swing swords. But he read, he watched, he spoke when it mattered. And in doing so, he became one of the few people who changed the shape of kingdoms without ever needing to lift a blade. Let the world see you as small. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. But when you stand anyway, when you speak clearly, when you walk forward without apology, you remind them dignity isn't granted, it's claimed. There was a character whose name few would expect to become a symbol of inner strength, Hodor. A man of simple words, a gentle soul. He said only one thing, Hodor. But what he represented was so much more. He carried Bran Stark through snow and storm. He stood, quite literally, at the door between life and death. And he gave everything, without fanfare, without glory. Not all heroes are loud, not all strength is visible. Sometimes the most powerful among us are the quiet ones. Hodor faced hardship, confusion, fear, yet he kept showing up, kept giving, kept holding the door. In our world, it's easy to think that strength looks like dominance, like winning arguments, like commanding attention, but maybe strength is gentler than that. Maybe it's the ability to be kind in a world that encourages hardness, to remain open when it would be easier to shut down, to carry someone else, even when no one is watching. There are days when your impact might feel invisible, when you're the one who listens, not speaks, Who gives without being asked? Who holds space for others, even while carrying your own weight? On those days, remember Hodor. He didn't need to be clever or bold. He just needed to be present. And that presence, that consistency, saved lives. You don't need to be famous or flawless or extraordinary. You just need to keep choosing love. And if you do, even silently, you might end up doing something more powerful than you'll ever know. There's a moment in the story when Maester Aemon, old and nearly blind, speaks a quiet truth. If we chopped off the heads of all the men who had slept with women, the wall would be guarded by headless ghosts. He says this after Jon Snow breaks a sacred vow, a lapse, a moment of humanity. But the point isn't about rules, it's about grace. You see, we all stumble, we all carry regrets, some whispered, some loud. But what defines us isn't whether we fall, it's what we do after. Our culture is quick to punish, to cancel, to judge, to pretend that mistakes mean you are unworthy of another chance. Wisdom is older than that. It remembers that growth doesn't happen without failure. That compassion isn't weakness. That forgiveness, real forgiveness, is a radical act of strength, not just toward others, but toward ourselves. Jon Snow was still the same man who risked everything for honor, still the same leader, still the same son. One mistake didn't erase all of that, and neither will yours. You are more than your lowest moment, more than your worst day, more than the version of yourself you've tried to bury. This isn't about pretending you haven't hurt others or yourself. It's about remembering that shame isn't a prison, it's a door. And you hold the key. Extend mercy, not just outward, but inward, because there's a part of you still worth believing in, still worth healing, still worth guiding back home. There's a quiet lesson buried beneath one of the show's most tragic betrayals. Jon Snow, after welcoming the wildlings through the wall, after breaking ancient laws for the sake of compassion, is killed by his own men. Why? Because he moved too fast, because he challenged what had always been, because change, even when noble, can be terrifying. Leadership isn't just about vision, it's about timing, about listening, about guiding people through change, not dragging them into it. You may be right, you may be ahead of your time, but if you forget to bring people with you, you'll walk alone. And perhaps he was right. But change imposed is often met with fear, even resistance. And isn't that true in our own lives? You may see a better way, in your family, your work, your community, but you'll find walls. Not because people are bad, but because people are scared. Scared of losing control, scared of becoming irrelevant, scared of being wrong. Wisdom is not just knowing what needs to change, it's knowing how to lead change gently. With empathy, with patience, with humility. True leadership is not declaring war on the old. It's inviting others to help shape the new. Sometimes that means slowing down. Sometimes it means waiting until the soil is ready. Not out of weakness, but wisdom. Jon Snow paid the price for rushing forward. But the lesson remains. Transformation is possible, but only when people feel safe enough to walk with you. In the game of power, it's not always the strongest who survive, but the most aware. And sometimes that awareness means knowing who stands behind you, and who doesn't. Ned Stark was a man of honor, but he made one fatal mistake. He assumed others shared his values. After King Robert died, Ned trusted in titles, in oaths, in signatures and scrolls. And, most dangerously, he trusted in people who had no reason to protect him. Petyr Baelish, Littlefinger, promised support. But when the moment came, he turned his back, and Ned paid the price. It's a hard truth to swallow, especially for those of us who lead with our hearts. Not everyone is loyal. Not everyone will catch you when you fall. And not everyone sees the world the way you do. Trust is beautiful, but blind trust can be fatal. So ask yourself, who truly has your back? Not in words, not in appearances, but in actions under pressure when no one is watching. The The truth is, you don't need many, just a few. A handful of souls who tell you the hard truths, who show up when it's inconvenient, who hold your name with care when you're not in the room. If you have even one person like that, you are wealthy. And if you don't, then maybe it's time to stop investing in appearances and start paying attention to character. Because no matter how strong or principled you are, you can't stand alone forever. Even the most honorable man in Westeros needed someone to stand behind him, and when no one did, he fell. What we leave behind matters. Ned Stark lost his life, but his legacy outlived him. His name carried weight. His values, though often mocked, were remembered. After his body fell, he didn't die rich, he didn't die victorious, but he died with honor. And strangely, that's what made him unforgettable. Compare that to Tywin Lannister. Powerful, feared, calculated. He commanded armies, bent kingdoms to his will. But what did he leave behind? A son who murdered him, another broken by shame, a daughter twisted by fear. No statues, no gold, no throne lasts forever. But what we stand for, that becomes our echo. The question isn't just how successful we are, it's what we imprint on those who walk beside us, how we make people feel. Whether our choices ripple forward with kindness or leave behind quiet harm. We often chase legacy like it's something external, a name etched in history, a monument, a biography. But real legacy is simpler. It's the moment your child repeats your values. It's the friend who remembers how you listened. It's the colleague who learned integrity by watching you choose the harder road. You won't always see the impact of your life, but you're leaving clues behind every day, in how you speak, in what you tolerate, in what you choose, even when no one's clapping. Live in such a way that people don't just remember what you did, they remember who they became when they were around you. That's the kind of legacy no crown can ever match. Patience is not weakness, it's strength, stretched across time. Their name, their place in the world. One by one, they were scattered, hunted, humiliated, beaten down. But they waited, they endured. And slowly, they came back. Not as they were, but as something wiser, stronger, sharper. They didn't rush vengeance. They didn't force power. They grew into it. We live in a world that glorifies urgency. Faster, bigger, now. We're told that if we haven't made it by a certain age, we failed. But the truth is quieter. Sometimes the season of collapse must come before the season of bloom. Sometimes life has to break you, so you can come back forged, not just fixed. Daenerys, too, knew patience, sold as property, silenced. Yet inside her, something smoldered. She waited, not passively, but purposefully. And when her time came, she was ready. Your story may not be moving as fast as you hoped. Your dreams may feel like they're on pause, but that doesn't mean they're gone. Growth isn't always visible. Sometimes it happens in silence, in setbacks, in the soil beneath the surface where no one claps for you. Don't let the timeline of others make you feel late. You're not late. You're in progress. And sometimes the most meaningful returns come after the longest winters. We often judge people by their past. But sometimes the past is just a chapter, not the whole story. Tyrion Lannister had blood on his hands. He drank too much. He killed his father. He was exiled, hunted, dismissed by nearly everyone. But Daenerys saw something else, not just a name, not just a reputation. She saw capacity. And in that moment, she made a decision many are too afraid to make. She gave someone with a complicated past a chance at a better future. That chance, that trust, changed everything. You see, not everyone who stumbles is dangerous. Some are simply wounded. Some were never taught another way. Some are waiting for one person to believe in them. This isn't about being naive. Not everyone deserves your faith. But imagine if no one ever gave you another shot. Imagine if your worst moment was the only thing anyone remembered. Growth doesn't erase mistakes, but it transforms them. Tyrion didn't become perfect, But he became useful, wise, necessary. Sometimes, the people who have fallen the furthest are the ones who can rise with the most clarity because they know pain. They've seen darkness, and they've chosen something different. So if someone's trying, really trying, don't write them off too quickly. That second chance you give might not just change them, it might change you. Because grace is a mirror, and when you hold it out to someone else, you often see your own reflection, a little softer, a little wiser. Not everyone who leaves is gone for good, and not everyone who returns comes back the same. Jon Snow died, quite literally, betrayed by those he trusted. Left in the snow, bleeding and broken, but he came back, not just with breath in his lungs, but with purpose in his soul. He had been through death, and somehow it made him more human, not less, more grounded, more aware of what mattered. There's something powerful about people who return after leaving. They've seen the world, they've tasted disappointment, they've questioned their worth, and when they come back, not as heroes, but as humbled beings, they often carry with them a clarity others don't. In our lives, it's easy to view those who leave, the ones who fail, who quit, who walk away, as done. But often, they are the ones most equipped to lead when they return. They know what it's like to be on the outside, so when they speak gently. When they lead with empathy. When they love deeply. If someone in your world has returned, to your life, your work, your family, don't just see who they were. Look at who they've become. And if you're the one returning, give yourself permission to bring all of your journey with you. Not as baggage, but as wisdom. You are not who you were. You're who you chose to be, after everything. And that is a kind of power no title, no crown, no sword can offer. There's a line Tyrion speaks that lingers. A mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone. In a world obsessed with power, violence, and domination, he reminds us of something quieter, but stronger. Knowledge is survival. Reflection is strength. He didn't command fear with height or armor. He read, he listened, he thought. And that, more than anything, kept him alive. We forget sometimes, in our rush to produce, to perform, that the sharpest edge we possess is our mind. Not just intellect, but understanding, self-awareness. The ability to step back and ask, why? Why am I reacting this way? Why do I chase certain things? Why do I believe what I believe? They sharpen our ability to respond rather than react, to notice what others miss, to see the chessboard, not just the next move. You don't need to read to impress, or speak in quotes, or collect degrees. You just need curiosity, the humility to admit you don't know everything, and the courage to learn anyway. Tyrion survived because he stayed hungry, not for power, but for perspective. He questioned everything, including himself, and in doing so, he grew into someone the world couldn't ignore. In a world that prizes speed and noise, let your stillness be a form of defiance. Let your learning be a quiet revolution. Because a sharpened mind cuts deeper than any sword, strength doesn't always win. In the second season of Game of Thrones, two mighty armies clash, both led by powerful brothers from House Baratheon, and both are defeated. Not because they weren't strong, not because they didn't believe in their cause, but because brute force alone isn't enough. It never has been. Victory belongs not to the loudest, but to the most aware, to the ones who read the room, who see the long game, who understand that wisdom, patience, and adaptability often outlast sheer strength. And maybe that's a lesson we need in our own lives. We're taught to push, to assert, to dominate. But some battles can't be won by charging forward. Sometimes it's the stillness that saves us, the choice to listen instead of argue, the ability to walk away rather than escalate, the discipline to wait when every part of you wants to act. Being powerful doesn't always mean being right. And being right doesn't always mean you'll win. So what do? You play the long game. You hold your integrity close. You learn when to speak and when to let silence do the heavy lifting. You stop trying to prove your worth through volume and start embodying it through calm presence. Because, in the end, it's not just about winning the fight, it's about becoming the kind of person worth following, one who doesn't need to conquer to know they already carry strength. Good leadership doesn't dominate, it elevates. Sansa Stark wasn't born a leader. She was silenced, manipulated, and used. But over time, through pain and observation, she learned. She watched Cersei's cruelty, Littlefinger's cunning, and Tyrion's resilience, and when her moment came, she didn't lead like them. She led like herself. But she didn't get there alone. She had someone who saw her potential, even when she didn't, someone who gave her knowledge, strategy, and a seat at the table. It reminds us, leadership isn't about being the smartest in the room. It's about recognizing and growing the strengths of others, especially those who've been overlooked, especially women in systems that weren't built for them. A true leader doesn't just give orders, they give space. They say, "I see something in you," even if you don't yet. We all remember the leaders who made us feel small, but we never forget the ones who made us feel seen. So whether you manage a team, raise a family, or mentor someone quietly, ask yourself not, "How do I stay on top?" but, "Who am I lifting as I rise?" The best leaders create more leaders, not copies, but originals. Sometimes the people with the most to offer come with the hardest pasts. Tyrion Lannister had been cast out, branded by scandal, mocked by his name, accused of crimes both real and false. Most would have walked past him. But Daenerys didn't. She didn't ask who he had been, she asked who he could be. And in doing so, she discovered something many miss. Potential often hides beneath reputation. We live in a world obsessed with credentials. We scan resumes, search histories, backgrounds. But what we often forget is that character is forged in fire. Some of the most capable people you'll ever meet, the ones who think differently, who act decisively. They've been broken before, they've fallen, and they've had to rebuild themselves from less than nothing. Does that make them dangerous? Sometimes. But it can also make them wise. Because the ones who failed, who've been humbled, abandoned, even shamed, are often the ones most ready to lead with compassion. Giving someone a second chance isn't weakness. It's strategy, it's empathy, it's courage. Not everyone will rise to meet that chance, but some will. And when they do, you'll realize you didn't just take a risk. You made an investment in someone extraordinary. Not every departure is a loss, and not every return is a mistake. He walked away from the Night's Watch, from everything he once swore to protect. But when he returned different, stronger, wiser, more centered. Sometimes people leave, they burn out, they walk away from your circle, your cause, your mission. It's tempting to write them off, to assume they're done. Unreliable, no longer useful. But that's not always the truth. The world outside changes us. It tests our beliefs. It reveals our blind spots. And if someone chooses to come back, they often carry something the group didn't have before. Perspective, experience. That person may now understand why the culture broke, why trust failed, why things didn't work the first time. And if you're wise, you won't just forgive them, you'll listen to them. Because those who return, not in pride, but in humility, don't come back to prove something. They come back to build something better. So don't just ask, why did they leave? Ask, what did they learn while they were gone? Sometimes the most powerful voices in your team are the ones who once had to walk away to understand what mattered. A mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone. Tyrion said it, and he lived it. But the lesson runs deeper than reading. It's about feeding the mind, sharpening it, honoring it, not just with knowledge, but with reflection. In a world that prized swords, banners, bloodlines, Tyrion wielded the only weapon he truly had, his thoughts. And time after time, it saved him. Not just from death, but from becoming like the people who tried to destroy him. You may not carry a title, you may not have a platform, but you have a mind, and that means you have power. Real strength is not in shouting, it's in understanding, in choosing your words with care, in listening deeper than most are willing to. We sharpen our minds not to win debates, but to know when not to speak, when to walk away, when to admit we were wrong. That takes more than books, it takes humility. So feed your mind, read, watch, wonder, not just to learn new things, but to see old things differently. Because the sharper your awareness, the more precise your peace. In chaos, be the one who's clear. In noise, be the one who listens. In fear, be the one who thinks. That is power, that is presence, that is how you win. Even when you don't look like the victor. Not every lesson in Game of Thrones came from a quote. Some came from silence, from watching, from noticing who rose and who fell. And if there's one final truth that lingers, it's this: power fades, glory fades, but the way you treat people, that stays. The soldiers who followed Jon Snow didn't do it because he demanded loyalty. Through fairness, through sacrifice, through consistency. Meanwhile, others ruled with cruelty, manipulation, fear. And even when they won, they were alone. In the end, we are not remembered for our titles. We are remembered for our impact, not in statues, but in stories. Not in legacies of stone, but in the way someone says your name when you're not in the room. So if you lead, lead with empathy. If you love, love without keeping score. If you speak, speak with care. People may forget your victories, but they'll never forget how you made them feel, especially when it was hard, especially when you didn't have to be kind, but chose to be anyway. Let your life be proof that gentleness is not weakness, that honor is not naivety, that staying true to yourself is the fiercest thing you can do. Because long after the battles are over, after the noise fades, what lasts is not who ruled, but who mattered. Life doesn't follow a script. It rarely gives us neat resolutions. But in that unpredictability lies the invitation to become, not perfect, not victorious, but present, reflective, alive. If anything here stayed with you, a line, a thought, a feeling, maybe sit with it for a while, let it echo. And when you're ready, you might find that others are asking the same questions, quietly, patiently, just like you.